Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our program. My name is Ken Zaintz. I'm the president and CEO of Alzheimer's New Jersey. Some of you probably know who we are, and some of you may not. So I'm going to give ourselves a little bit of a commercial. So Alzheimer's New Jersey is a New Jersey-based, local, community-focused organization that provides programs, resources, and services for families that are impacted by Alzheimer's disease in our state. You may know that, well, if you're dealing with this as a caregiver today, or if you've dealt with it in the past, you know the huge impact that Alzheimer's disease takes on the person with the disease, yourself as the caregiver, and certainly on entire families. There are over 600,000 people in New Jersey that are impacted by what we know is a real life-changing disease. As a community-focused organization, we have a telephone helpline that's available during business hours, Monday through Friday. Caregivers can call us for all kinds of reasons to find out information about the disease, to register for programs that we have, just to even have someone to talk to when you just need to vent and maybe to help work out, try to solve a particular problem that you may be having in caring for your loved one. We also do a lot of caregiver education, and tonight is one example of that. On the topics for our caregiver education programs range from a general overview about Alzheimer's disease to how to manage behaviors, how to communicate more effectively with the person who has Alzheimer's disease. We like to think that our programs not only give caregivers information, but also helps with practical solutions, practical advice, and again, just a way to really connect in what is oftentimes a very isolating disease. We also have support groups for caregiver support groups. Many of those are virtual. We also have those groups in person. I think caregivers can be vitally important, again, to sort of end some of the isolation that you might be feeling as a caregiver, to connect with other people who are going through the same thing. It's an education resource to really bounce things off other caregivers who are in your same position or maybe further along in their caregiving journey, and you can learn from them. We have a lot of information on our website, which is alznj.org. You can find information about the disease. You can find information about clinical trials and how to get involved in clinical trials. So we really are here for you as the caregiver to be the place to turn when you don't know where else to turn, which unfortunately is often the case with Alzheimer's. So, that's just a little bit of who we are. We are, we're a nonprofit organization. So everything that we do is done through the generosity of our donors, through events like our Walk to Fight Alzheimer's events, our gala, which we just had 3 weeks ago. And then for our donors, we assure them, because it's true, that because we're a New Jersey-based organization and we're not affiliated with any national organization, we're specifically focused on New Jersey. So 100% of donations are used to support New Jersey families that are impacted by this disease. So that's just a little bit about who we are, what we do. Best resource is our website. Again, it's alznj.org. So it's alznj.org. You can find our helpline number. You can find lots of ways to contact us. And of course, there's a lot of helpful information as well. Without further ado, I want to introduce our presenter for our program this evening: financial considerations and planning tips for caregivers of individuals with dementia. So, there's a lot of financial advice programs and seminars out there, and we hope that you find this one specifically focused on the needs that you have as a caregiver of someone with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. So Bob Dole, our presenter, is owner and principal of Solution Driven Wealth, a fiduciary abiding by the best interests of his clients. Bob has been assisting individuals and small to medium-sized business owners for 30 years. Bob's practice has centered on retirement planning solutions, investment consulting, insurance consulting, as well as more complex tax and estate planning strategies. Bob is also advises on group benefit markets, 401k, 403b, and other retirement plans designed for business owners, and he understands how these plans integrate with an individual's overall retirement and wealth strategy. Bob takes pride in getting to know his clients' needs and objectives prior to making specific investment, tax, or insurance recommendations. He is deeply committed to the success of his clients. So Bob, I'm happy to and honored to turn this over to you.
Well, Ken, thank you first of all very much for the introduction, but most importantly to you and to your organization for everything that you do. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. I think everyone on the line tonight has a story, right? How you got to this place and the impact to you and to your family members and to your loved ones, especially. Alzheimer's has certainly impacted me as well. And, I just wanted to take a few minutes and say thank you for what you're doing. Having gone through this myself, I really, this organization, I was not aware of it. I wish I was when my family was going through this, but and that's kind of the story. I'll talk about it a little bit. I've grown up and lived in New Jersey for most of all of my life. Like you, I have a story, and when I was, my parents had gotten married much later in life. And when my dad was 58, unfortunately, he developed brain cancer at a very young age. And I was not even in the industry at that time. So my family was frankly very ill prepared for what lay before us. Our father was, and my dad was the John Wayne type of person. We felt nothing could stop him. And, when someone has cancer that's debilitating as he had, we were thrown into this situation where we didn't have a plan, we didn't have an advisor, and the solutions were really very, very unattractive to my family. They didn't come from much, but my dad was a carpenter and had accumulated 2 homes that he built literally board by board. So this was a very deep and emotional legacy that they wanted to leave to our family. And that was not going to be possible if we didn't make some steps. Now, at that time, our only solution was really to bring my dad home and to care for him in our own home. It was not a great situation. It impacted everyone in our family, especially my mother at the time, who is, we'll talk about in a few minutes, his sole caregiver. And my brother. So it impacted us very deeply. And I kind of made a vow that at the time that I felt like I could have an impact on other people's lives. So what we decided to do is really, I changed my career to one in where we got really involved into helping people protect and preserve their assets, do much more significant planning for them. And the reality is that after I got into the industry, I evaluated options that were available, both as far as gifting assets away and those sorts of things that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the reality is that I wanted my mom to have her independence. And part of that involved at the time, purchasing coverage that protected her and really protected the legacy that they wanted to leave. What we did was unique. My mother did not pay any of the costs of this coverage. My brother and I absorbed that cost. And I'm not saying that to, to put that out there. It's just that, when you're trying to preserve assets, the way I guess we looked at it was, why should my parents, or even my mom at the time, my dad was was deceased, why should they cover that cost? Why should they absorb that and impact their own life? They're really, anything that they had, we said spend for themselves, but that was not their wish. So they asked me, hey, this was your responsibility to step in and do this. This is your calling, take care of it. And we made steps to do that. Okay. So that's a little bit about my story about why I'm so deeply committed, to this. That plan that we put in place, we actually used. My mom did eventually suffer from Alzheimer's disease. We cared for my mom in our own home, as many of you are probably doing today if you have a loved one that's suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia. And that's where the most of the care is given. We had a plan, but as you all know, you have a plan and then God laughs, I guess, on certain days and on many days, So we managed that until my mom's care became just progressively worse, and we really just could not manage for her. So that specific plan, though, preserved a legacy that they wanted. It provided independence. It provided the cost for care substantially. And I think it had a meaningful impact on how I looked at things when we planned for clients. Paying for care and doing that is something that you do when you're healthy, unfortunately. If you have a loved one who has Alzheimer's right now, those plans are really not possible to put into play. But it points out, I think, in your own life and in my own life, the need for planning. And we're going to take a few minutes to talk about planning, in a few minutes. But we're also going to talk about you, the caregiver, and what you can do to, the impacts to you, certainly, and also, what you can do to kind of take care of yourself and things you should not neglect. So, who is providing the care and where is care delivered for those who have memory issues such as Alzheimer's? Most of that care is really being provided by family members, the vast majority. And most all of the care, 80% of the care for long-term care, and this is nationwide, is being delivered at the home initially. I think maybe before this, you kind of got into this situation, you would automatically say, well, that's a nursing home or that's an assisted living type of facility, but that's just not the reality of it. Nursing home or assisted living is probably the last step, or the next to last step that you really want to take. Most people are getting care at home, being delivered by family members. For those that have some long-term care protection, it's being provided by that. But in most situations, it is not being paid for solely from paid help. It's being provided for by family members, and the impact to caregivers is really pretty significant. The emotional, the mental, and the financial challenges that caregivers face is as Ken said, it's really all encompassing. It's engrossing, and to the point where 62%, as the slide indicates, state that it's just almost impossible for them to provide the level of care that they can do on a daily basis. It's impacted their own financial ability. I'm sure many of you may have those challenges as well, where you may be working and you have to cut short your day because you need to provide that level of care to your loved one. And many provide, it's very challenging to provide care while they're working from home. The time commitment can certainly range, but Ken and his team can tell you that caregivers can spend anywhere between 25 to 35 hours a week easily on providing care to loved ones. And, that's just them. They're not getting reimbursed for that. So they're taking away time from their job or from their own family to provide that level of care. And caregivers are stressed. The point that I would say, and we'll make a couple of points, you cannot neglect your own health and well-being. It's, in my mind, a thing that I saw my own mother do when she was caring for my father when he was home. Even my own situation when we were caring for my mother at home. These were stressors that we all face, and I'm sure you're all facing now. You need to do the basic things like get to the doctor, make sure you're checking in with work, make sure your career is not impacted by these situations. Your most important asset is really yourself and your ability to be engaged with your family and your work environment. And you have to do these things. And as you know, it is a balancing act. It's a very, very challenging environment. And again, additional worries that people have that they just can't do it. You're stressing about, as we did in our own situation with my mother, we kept my mom at home for a very long period of time, but her condition worsened, and our home was simply not compatible with the level of care that she needed. So we had a care coordinator come to our home and evaluate our home to assess if it was a safe environment for my mother to live in. If you have a loved one who's, and I know we have many, many people on the line tonight at various stages, but if you're in the early stages, certainly whether it's a physical condition or a mental one, making it easier for your loved ones to navigate bathrooms, doorways, those sorts of things. Home modification is important, and Ken and his team, I think, can give you advice on ways and information to protect your family member in those circumstances. Again, making it a safe environment so they can extend their stay, hopefully in their own home or in a home that you provided for them, can be critical to improving your quality of life, but also the quality of life of your loved one. What we can't shy away from is the economic impact that occurs when a caregiver is devoting so much time to a loved one. The financial considerations, as we show here, are very significant statistically and impactful. And again, having lived through it myself with my own mother, I know that, in our circumstance, our plan was to keep my mom at home, but I had a career. I have clients. We have a practice, a very successful one, thankfully, where people are relying on us and for critical services. And I'm sure you all too have careers and jobs that you love and that you're engaged in, and people rely on you as well. In my circumstance, what we did is we were able to take advantage of an adult day center that was local to where we lived. And my job function during the day was at least enabling my mom to get off to the adult day center. They picked her up and they dropped her off in the afternoon, and I was there in the morning, So that enabled us to have a much better quality of life. It enabled my mom to be in a facility where she was, or a location during the day where she was safe and engaged in activities for really well over a year. So that was meaningful. It provided my wife and I a respite, if you will, for worrying about if my mom was going to be cared for during the day. So these are all considerations that you might want to take into account in your own situation to have a better quality of life for yourself and that for your loved one. Generally, what are the types of things that I've learned and being in this career for 32 years, obviously right now, if you're going through this, having a plan in place ahead of time may not be something that you were able to do. But if you're in the throes of it right now, I think developing a plan of what makes sense, what's logical, and communicating that as well as you can, if you haven't had a time to do it ahead of time, is really essential. Some of the most successful ways that I've seen families deal with Alzheimer's is by dividing duties and responsibilities. I think of one family in particular, a gentleman who all of our clients that work with us, I consider them family, and I actually get very emotional when I think of them, and it's meaningful to me because we work with many of these folks for 20 and 30 years. And this one gentleman in particular, Bernhard, he was a terrific man, and unfortunately he did begin to suffer Alzheimer's. He had 3 children who very smartly, quickly developed a plan to care for him. And initially his care was provided for in his home. They had caregivers coming, but each one of the siblings had a special discipline. One of the siblings was a son about my age who's very, very proficient with financial matters. And in this circumstance, we worked very closely with coordinating payments and really looking at the financial affairs of this individual who suffered from Alzheimer's. They were very fortunate to have a nurse in their family. One is Bernhard's daughter was a nurse, and she took over a lot of the healthcare responsibilities for her father. And really, that became effective as well. She didn't delve into the financial aspects of it because her brother was covering that. And then the last sibling covered that, where really the homes and the maintenance of the homes and whatnot. The general comments from Andy, who was the one who was in charge of the financials, was, Bob, thank God I was, in between my career responsibilities. This is a full-time job managing my dad's affairs. He was overwhelmed by the responsibilities and could not imagine taking on all aspects of this by himself. In my own circumstance, I was fortunate enough to have my spouse, Donna, who is my true partner in life, really help me with caring for my mom at our home. If it was just even bouncing off ideas amongst one another, and then obviously doing some of the hard work in evaluating, practitioners or caregivers to provide care for my mom. And then eventually, when it became necessary, evaluating facilities that might be appropriate for my mom to enter into, because it did become apparent, unfortunately, that we could not manage it at home. It got to a point where we could not do that. So, having family members and loved ones help you care for your loved one is truly very, very, very important. So I would encourage you to reach out to your siblings and engage them. It's not good enough that they don't become engaged. It's not fair to you as the caregiver. If you're taking on all of this responsibility right now, something will give, and it could impact your health and your own well-being, both financial, mental and physical. So again, engaging with others and leveraging resources such as Ken's group, hugely important. And I think Ken and his team can give you a lot of good guidance in that regard. Part of taking care of yourself is also taking care of your financial obligations that you have. People have asked me, well, Bob, I'm seeing my loved one and family member go through this. This is a wake-up call for me and my own financial affairs. I've never addressed this issue. There's a concern that it could be hereditary. Could I also suffer from Alzheimer's and other conditions in the future? And could that endanger the legacy that I want to leave to my family? And it can, and for a lot of people, it's a wake-up call. And I'm just going to highlight briefly, some of those considerations. Options for paying for long-term care. We are not going to right now, and I think we'll talk about this at a later event, talk about Medicaid qualification. But generally speaking, if you're in the throes of this, you probably understand that just gifting assets away into your name or into other families' names will automatically enable you to qualify for Medicaid assistance. That will not occur. The laws have been strengthened in towards the government's favor for many years to make that situation unlikely in most circumstances. The Medicaid qualifications differ from state to state. There's an asset test and an income test. And in most cases, if you have means, those assets will have to be spent down. Typically the look back period is a 5-year period, whether it's to a person or to a trust. Many of the options have changed. Back 20 years ago, the types of contracts that were offered back in the 70s even were nursing home only type contracts. Then the industry realized that most people wanted to receive care not in a nursing home facility, but in a home care setting. And the policies morphed and adapted into that type of structure. These types of contracts were priced on what's called a health insurance chassis. And what that means to you as a consumer is that those premiums can go up. And in my case, with coverage for my mother, that is exactly the type of contract that we purchased at the time from a large company, John Hancock, and one of the leading providers at the time for long-term care insurance. John Hancock had a series of rate increases, as many of the carriers who offer those types of contracts did. So there was probably 3 or 4 rate increases on those types of contracts. And again, we were absorbing those. In most circumstances, the insured and their family is absorbing those increased costs. Once the person would go on claim, the premiums would cease, typically after satisfying a waiting period of either 90 to 100 days in most circumstances. The policies at the time paid out anywhere between 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years. Generally, the plan options were quite rich. Unfortunately, at that time, most of the carriers were not skilled in underwriting this type of coverage. They only had a background in disability type claims, and they applied those same levels of standards to the claims that they would incur on a long-term care contract. The claims process and the claims that were incurred were much, much higher than most of these companies ever considered. So companies like a John Hancock, Prudential, Metropolitan Life, all really became very involved and upside down, if you will, in the claims process. So these types of older contracts where there was maybe 400 companies offering them really have shrunk down because the companies found that they poorly underwrote the contracts, didn't price the contracts properly, and many of those companies have now left the business. 2 companies in particular that had the government contract for long-term care, John Hancock, MetLife, no longer write traditional long-term care reimbursement policies. So that's saying something when the 2 largest companies that underwrote that business no longer exist in it. There are still a few companies that underwrite those contracts. And the style of contract that is really more, if you could go back one slide, Lauren, please. If you look at the type of contract that we see most common today, the more common solution that people look at are contracts built on a life insurance chassis. And that's fundamentally different than the old chassis, which again was built on the health insurance chassis, where companies can apply to the state for rate relief. If they have a health insurance chassis type product, companies cannot apply for rate relief when they have a life insurance chassis product. They're not built that way, built entirely different. The benefit that I think most consumers see is that there is now cost certainty around their solution, where under the old chassis, products could become more expensive as time went on. The newer type of chassis of product provides them cost certainty. The other aspect that is somewhat attractive, I think, to consumers based on studies that have been done is that most of these solutions offer a life insurance benefit of some size, so that if the individual taking out the contract were to pass away before needing care, their heirs essentially recover the premiums that had been paid. These policies differ, and again, we're not here talking about specific companies or solutions. It's just understanding how these types of products generally work and understand how they might, in a certain circumstance, apply to you and help you protect your assets and help you protect your estate. Again, some misconceptions that, again, depending on where you are in the process, you're probably going through right now. Options for paying for care right now, health insurance largely does not cover large long-term care expenses. Medicare will partially cover some long-term care, but essentially it is not designed and was never designed to cover custodial type care. It's not how the program was built. Medicaid, which we discussed briefly, is a possibility, but only after you've spent down a very, very significant portion of your assets. And there's both an asset and an income test that you must qualify for. In some cases, if you're in this situation, maybe you are the child that's caring for the loved one, and that's maybe a viable solution. But in many cases, our children have moved across the country and logistically have established roots in other parts of the country, and it's simply not viable for that person to be moved in a different location. So counting on your adult children to care for you is pretty challenging. And then certainly out-of-pocket payment of expenditures is what many people do that do not have care. They have no other option but to pay dollar for dollar for the care that they're being provided for. In many cases, even if you have coverage, which can be very effective in providing for most of the coverage, it may not cover all of it. So in many cases, you're utilizing supplemental sources of income like Social Security, pensions, to meet that obligation if you have a policy that's paying for care. So good ideas to use as a strategy, and again, to have a plan. What's the right solution for you? Only a very small amount of people have generally talked to a professional about what options might be available to them. Most people don't discuss this. It's not a common theme to talk about, how I'm going to cover my own care, and what am I going to do about it if that day comes. And I think a financial professional such as our organization that can avail ourselves to many different resources can be a really good opportunity to have that discussion. We can discuss your own situation, and then if necessary, even engage legal counsel to help with the transferring of assets and things of that nature if it's appropriate. Again, our organization is not a legal organization, so transferring of assets and gifting are all strategies to consider, but we would do that in conjunction with a well-coordinated plan of attack in your own unique special circumstance. I have a tremendous amount of empathy if you're on this call and you're in the middle of caring for a loved one. Again, what we talked about are the emotional, financial, and physical stresses of caring for a loved one. It's profound. I think what we would say is, wherever possible, engage as many people in the process as possible. You need to take care of yourself. What most people have to do, I think, is overwhelming. The condition can be overwhelming, and I think it's very smart to engage as many people in the process as possible. Have a plan, and again, protect yourself. You're no good to anyone if you're not as simple as taking your own medications, getting to the gym, making sure your work environment and you're engaged with work. Because if you have a situation where your work environment deteriorates and then you lose your job, well, nothing's been solved, right? So I think, having those honest conversations with your employer that you need extra time are good things to do, so they understand your situation and can again empathize with you as well. If you do want to reach out to myself or our team, we're more than happy to provide a consultation with you, just to chat on the phone, or if you want to come into our office, that's fine. Just to chat on the phone about, what some of the situations you're experiencing, what questions you have about your own unique situation, and where, if any areas we can assist in. Having gone through this myself, I'm very empathetic to your situation, and I know our team is as well. We have our own clients right now going through the very same issues that you are. Many who we met have plans, or we develop plans with them, and some unfortunately don't have plans. We met them later and didn't develop a plan. So we're going through that right now, elbow to elbow with them, and working out solutions on protecting them and their assets. So Ken, I wanted to say thank you again for having me. I know one question was, what is the typical cost for care for, I think it was home care? Most of the policies, and that's a somewhat involved question, generally speaking, if you're looking at a traditional long-term care contract, most of these plans don't cover just home care. They'll cover nursing home and community-based or assisted living type care. You can specify the level of care that you want at home. So if you're solving for a solution that, for instance, is $200 to $300 a day in cost, and home care you feel might be lower than that, then you can work with your advisor to develop a plan that might cover a reduced amount. The reason you might do this, and I'm not saying you should do it, the reason that you might do this is you might want to control some of the costs, of the plan. The other big driving factor, and that's why it's hard to give a definitive answer, the big driving cost of care is inflation coverage. When you put inflation coverage on a traditional expense reimbursement long-term care contract, that will tend to inflate the premiums. And in most cases, those contracts the benefit will automatically increase each and every year to the owner of that contract, or to the insured of that contract. But that can be a big driver of the premium costs. In terms of actual costs, depending on how rich you make the contract, the plans can be as low as $2,000 to as high as $6,000 to $7,000 to $8,000 to $9,000 annually. So these plans can be expensive. I will tell you, having said this, that these are not the typical contract that consumers are evaluating and purchasing in today's environment. They are very much more going towards a contract that has cost certainty on it. And these are called hybrid long-term care contracts that, again, are built on a life insurance chassis where there is cost certainty. And these contracts, depending on the type of benefit you're solving for, will require a premium payment. In many cases, these premium payments could be in the form of a lump sum, where you simply take cash and buy a lump sum contract, and your policy is essentially fully paid for. Those contracts have typically a death benefit to them, and actually may have a component where if you, for whatever reason, no longer want the contract, they will give you cost and premium recovery in the future. So again, as a consumer, you probably realize the richer you make a contract, the more expensive it will become. And that's really no different in the area of long-term care. So again, we're a fiduciary both on the assets that we manage for clients. So if we have a client come in, we obviously do a very thorough analysis, and that's the reason the name Solution Driven Wealth was created. It's because we don't come in with a presupposition to a client's situation. We really solve and drive towards a solution that's unique to them. And that is no different when it comes to insurance solutions. We are tied into many organizations where we can evaluate different sorts of products and different sorts of solutions for clients, and we can really spreadsheet those out, and depending on what they're trying to achieve, kind of direct them in the area that is best suited for what they're trying to accomplish. So and again, we're committed to that. The industry changes, and we do keep up to date with the newest product developments. You have to recognize that insurance companies are profit organizations. They create products for a profit. That doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that they will constantly reprice their products depending on if they're making a profit or not making a profit on a product, and also on marketplace considerations as well. So if the competitive environment is such that a company needs to lower their price, you may see an opportunity to purchase a contract that's viable for you and for your family. Someone asked a question, and I'll ask this: at what age should a person get an LTC plan? It's been a kind of a sobering conversation. I'll joke for a minute. We would all just buy this the day before we needed it, of course. So we need to bring a little levity to the conversation tonight. But really, I think it's part of your estate plan, and that you should be developing that really in your 50s and when you are healthy. Conditions that carriers tend not to like are things like diabetes, mobility issues where you're incapacitated, where you may have suffered a stroke, those types of conditions. And those types of conditions typically will manifest themselves, and I'm not a doctor, typically in your later 50s to 60s. So if you're going to evaluate coverage options, you certainly want to do it while you're healthy and able to apply for coverage. Most of these contracts are all underwritten. There are some solutions that are unique if you are an older applicant that don't involve traditional long-term care, life insurance chassis type solutions. Those are unique, and they provide a leveraged benefit of anywhere between 2 to 3 times of what your deposit was into the contract. And those are unique. Those are typically good solutions for people that may have a minor health condition or maybe can't get traditional long-term care coverage. So again, when we look at the environment, we could have a client that comes into the office and has a unique set of circumstances, and then the next client that comes into the office is a completely stage of life. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. The solutions are unique and tailored for your specific needs, and they should be. I think some folks had some questions about how to get in touch with us, but certainly, Ken, why don't you go back to the slide, and really, Ken, do you want to wrap it up?
Well, first, were there other questions
We do have one more question that came in, which is how many days for most respite programs, especially those that offer scholarships?
So our program, the way our program works is there's an application process, and then we have what's available is $1,000 one time for the caregiver, and that money is to be used for licensed home care, adult daycare, and families have used that money. For example, if there was a family wedding, the family couldn't go, or the primary caregiver couldn't go because they needed someone to care for the person at home with the disease. It can be used for short-term care. Sometimes some facilities will offer short-term care. It's $1,000 to be used for qualified respite services. How far that goes and is really up to the caregiver. So we're not paying directly for the respite service. We're actually giving the money to the caregiver to use, in a way that's consistent with how we run our program, and that would all be part of the application process. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you. I mean, we appreciate you doing this program with us this evening, and providing a really great overview. And I think what your comment about, look, this isn't easy, and it's different for every family. And so your comment about tailoring, looking at the situation and tailoring it appropriately, I mean, I think that's really important. The slide that when I started out this evening, I talked a little bit about some of the programs and services that we provide as an organization. So now you can see them all on this slide. That helpline number is our toll-free number that you can connect with our staff. And again, it's really an opportunity to we welcome questions specifically about the disease. People call us because they're concerned that their loved one may be exhibiting cognitive difficulties, and they really don't know what to do, don't know about how to get a diagnosis and what that entails, and where to go. So we can help with those kinds of things. It's also a place that we try to problem solve. If you're having a particular issue, like bathing is a common issue that caregivers might have. The person that you're caring for, you're finding it difficult to get them to bathe or take a shower, or there are other behavior type issues. So there's a whole host of things that we can help with, along with giving you options for services that we don't provide, but that we're aware of that are in the community. Our respite care and wellness program, Bob talked a lot about how important it is to take care of yourself as the caregiver. Our respite care and wellness program really emphasizes for caregivers the importance of self-care, of taking care of yourself. And through our donors, we're fortunate to have some dollars that are available through an application process that can support for us at least, and I sometimes call it seed money, so caregivers can see the value of respite, whether it's a couple of days a week in an adult day program that Bob mentioned, or whether it's having a home health care aide come into your home, but somebody, something to provide you some relief as the caregiver. So we do have some funding available to support that. I mentioned our support groups, which are really important for so many reasons. So many times people say, oh, I have enough problems. I don't need to sit and listen to other people's problems and issues. But support groups are so much more than that. They really are a place to find resources, to get more educated, and most importantly, to connect with other people who are going through the same thing, especially when the disease does become so isolating, for you as the caregiver. community education, and like I said, tonight is just an example of that. We have a program that we call Always Safe. Part of that is the education that we provide to police and other first responders so that they can be more effective in responding to an incident in the community where the person who may be involved in a traffic mishap, for example, has dementia. And then clinical trials teaching and the value of really getting involved in a clinical trial. I mean, where we are today with Alzheimer's disease research and the pharmaceuticals that are currently available, none of that happens without without volunteers who are willing to get involved in a clinical trial program. And we can help explain those. And if you're interested, based on the criteria, potentially get you involved in the right trial for your unique circumstance. And then there's our website, alznj.org, where you'll find a lot of the information, at least that I talked about today. We have videos. We have a section of our website where you can register with a password, and you can see some of our past webinars where experts in the community, including attorneys and physicians, have talked about some of the issues that I mentioned when I was explaining, and as I'm explaining some of our services. So so that's who we are. We're your resource. We are the place to turn. So don't be afraid to pick up that phone and call us, because we'll answer live. And that's what we're here for. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Bob, thank you, and I want to thank your team for keeping us on time and keeping us on track. And I hope everyone has a great evening and a great weekend to come.
Thank you for everyone who joined this evening. I know I speak for Ken in saying, hey, we certainly can empathize what you're going through. I would absolutely reach out to Ken's organization and his team. They're great folks. They'll help you. And obviously, if we can help you in any way, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to have a dialogue with you and see what we can do to assist you in any way at all. Okay, so thank you again, Ken, and Lauren, thanks for coordinating. And to everyone attending, have a wonderful start to the long weekend. Take care.
Thank you, Bob.